You have a history in the West. You have a history. Which thing is real? Right, the West is really strong these years, but the history of the West. And I want to be honest, a lot of it is false history. Why not stand alone? Because there is no second history of the West. There's nothing else to prove it. Look how much underground cultural relics have been unearthed in the West. Europe has a long history. Look at how many of his own things are in his museum. There are several so-called parchment books. You tell me what history books existed in the West before the 14th century. Look at that box of horse epics in the West. That is not as reliable as China's mountains and seas. You have nothing. You told me you have a long history. Still shy and say that China has no history. You have a history. When was Sima Qian's historical record written? 2,000 years ago. Chinese history books. Archaeological artifacts can be unearthed from time to time. Look at how many Qin and Han slips have been unearthed now. Keep rewriting history. Change history. How many words are there for the ritual invitation? 200,000 words. So we say, that's history. It is constantly underground, with various excavated cultural relics to support it. What is the history of the West? How many ancient books do we have? There are several ancient books in the West. No, not to mention many books in the West. You see, some time ago we had a famous scholar, Professor Jin Canrong, who questioned Aristotle. Where did you write such a book of nearly 3 million words? How did you write it? You didn't even have the tools to write books in ancient times. What sand? Was sand produced in ancient Egypt? Sand is made of sandgrass. The Nile Delta is cyclical. There's 4 months of the year. The water depth is 2 or 3 meters. And that sandgrass can only grow in water half a meter deep. So there was no way ancient Egypt could have made papyrus. As for the parchment, even more impossible, can be preserved so completely. You look at what's been discovered in the West recently. A lot of you feel new and scary at first glance. And what about the rust on it? What about historical traces? No, so our country has been weak in recent times. We've led to a lot of people being culturally insecure. History is extremely insecure, questioning one's own history and culture. Now you see through archaeological discoveries, constantly verifying. It is said in the historical records of Sima Qian, including what he said about the legendary era, many things have been confirmed. This proves that this is history. On the contrary, you have a history in the West. You have a history. Which one is real, right? You say the Trojan horse in the West is written vividly in history. Do you know how big that city was in ancient Greece at that time? A city that can't even hold 1,000 people. So as soon as you hear it, you know it's silly. What ancient Greece on the Asiatic peninsula? These countries are fighting to the death. It's all sort of collusive, just like the Sengoku period in Japan. Can the Sengoku period in Japan be the same as the Sengoku period in China? China's Sengoku dynasty mobilizes troops. That's hundreds of thousands of troops fighting. Didn't Japan's Sengoku period just a few townships fight each other? So actually, we don't say this. It's not good to be obedient. We don't just talk about him in these things. If you really want to say it, you will say it to Westerners, let alone cultural confidence. I can't even lift my spine.